My husband had barely been laid to rest when my mother-in-law slapped my 5-year-old daughter in front of a room full of mourners and told us to get out of the house. The sound of breaking glass came first. A small, sharp crack, then another cutting through the low funeral whispers in the living room and making every face turn at once. My daughter stood beside the memorial table in her black dress and white tights frozen over the fallen frame. The photograph of her father lay under shattered glass. One of her little hands was still lifted in the air like she thought she could still catch what had already fallen. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The slap came so fast I barely saw my mother-in-law move. My daughter's face snapped to the side. The room went completely still. Then my mother-in-law looked straight at me and said, "Take your garbage and leave this house." For 1 second I could not breathe. Then I was moving. I dropped to my knees, pulled my daughter against me, and pressed my hand over the red mark already rising on her cheek. "She is just a child," I said. My voice came out low and shaking. "She ruined my son's life," my mother-in-law said. "If you were me, would you walk out or stay one more minute?" A few hours earlier, I had been standing at the cemetery holding that same child's hand while they lowered my husband into the ground. The sky had been gray all afternoon, not raining, just hanging there heavy enough to make every sound feel small. People stood around us in black coats, offering the usual soft lines people use when grief belongs to someone else. "Stay strong. He was a good man. You have to think of your daughter now." My daughter had looked up at me while the priest spoke and asked Mom, "Why are they putting Dad there?" I had knelt in the damp grass and brushed her hair back. "He's resting," I told her. Even then, I hated how empty it sounded. She nodded because children accept the version of pain adults hand them when they have no other choice. Across the grave, my husband's family stood together, not with us, near us, around us, but never with us. My mother-in-law cried into a tissue, but even that looked controlled, as if she remembered she was supposed to. My father-in-law stood stiff and distant. My sister-in-law whispered to a cousin, then looked away the second she saw me watching. They had never accepted me. Not really. I was not the woman they would have chosen for him. I did not come from their world. I did not grow up in houses with staff and business dinners and polished family names. I came from a life where bills were opened over the kitchen sink and every dollar had to be explained. My husband had loved me anyway. More than that, he had chosen me openly and stubbornly, and that was the part they never forgave. They tolerated me because he was alive. They tolerated my daughter because she was his. A week before he died, he had been in his hospital bed, pale and exhausted, but still more alert than anyone wanted to admit. He had looked at me then, at our daughter asleep in the chair by the window, and said something I did not fully understand until that day. "If anything happens to me, do not let them rush you into anything." I had leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "Wait," he said. "No matter what they say, wait." I thought he meant funeral arrangements, money, grief. I thought he was afraid I would panic. Standing over his grave, I realized he had not been afraid of me. He had been afraid of them. On the drive back to the house, no one spoke. My daughter curled against me in the back seat, exhausted from crying, from confusion, from a day too large for her body. I kept one arm around her and watched the roads disappear behind us until the iron gates of my in-laws' estate opened and the house came into view. It looked exactly the same. Stone front, tall windows, trimmed hedges, a house built to tell the world stability lived inside it. But the moment we stepped through those front doors, I felt the whole place change around me. People were already gathered in the living room, family, friends, business associates, women in black dresses holding cups of coffee they did not want, men with careful faces and lowered voices. Flowers stood on every surface. My husband's photograph had been placed in the center of the room like an altar. My daughter saw it before I did. She let go of my hand and walked toward it in uncertain little steps, drawn to the one face she had been searching for all day. "Dad," she whispered. She reached out. The frame slipped. And now, standing in that same room with broken glass at our feet and my mother-in-law's handprint on my child's face, I understood that the real funeral was only beginning. Not for my husband. For the illusion that they had ever intended to let us stay. "She's garbage," my mother-in-law said again. I looked up slowly. "She is your granddaughter. Do not call her that in my house," she snapped. My sister-in-law stepped forward, arms folded across her black dress. "You always did this," she said. "You walked in here acting like you belonged because my brother was too soft to tell you the truth." "What truth?" I asked. "That you brought nothing to him," she said. "No name, no standing, no protection, just one mistake after another wrapped up in a sad story." "Stop talking," I said. My father-in-law moved, then calm enough to make it worse. "You will lower your voice in this house," he said, "especially now." Now, that word almost made me laugh. Now was exactly the problem. Now that my husband was gone. Now that they thought there was no witness left who mattered. My daughter's fingers dug into my sleeve. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered again. "No," I said quickly. "Look at me." I pulled back enough so she could see my face. "This is not your fault. Not your fault." She nodded because she loved me, not because she believed it. Around us, the room kept watching. That part I will never forget. Not their words, their silence. No one stepped in. No one told my mother-in-law she had just struck a grieving child at her father's memorial. A few people looked uncomfortable. Most did not move at all. Then my mother-in-law did something that told me the slap had not been a loss of control. It had been the beginning of a plan. "Marion," she said to the house manager, "bring down their things." I lifted my head. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "Their room, the child's room. Pack what matters. They are leaving tonight." My sister-in-law smiled. "Honestly, maybe it's better this way. She won't even remember this house in a few years." My daughter stiffened in my arms. My father-in-law turned toward the guests with the face of a man managing an inconvenience. "I apologize for this scene," he said. "We will make sure they are taken care of." Taken care of. Not comforted. Removed. A woman from one of my mother-in-law's charity boards murmured something about discretion for the child. My sister-in-law looked at the broken frame, and then at me. "This is what my brother always cleaned up after," she said. "Your chaos, your need, your mess." I stood carefully, still holding my daughter. "Say one more thing about her," I said, "and I will forget this is a funeral." That shifted the room. Only a little, but enough. My mother-in-law heard it too. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I am answering you." "Then answer this," she snapped. "When were you planning to leave? Before dinner? Or were you going to turn this into another performance?" My father-in-law crossed to the console table, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thin document. He held it out to me with a pen already clipped to the top. "You will sign this before you go," he said. I took it. The title read, "Acknowledgement of Voluntary Departure and Temporary Family Settlement." Even through the fog of grief, I understood exactly what it was trying to do. It stated that I was leaving the residence of my own free will, that I accepted temporary financial support from the family, that I would remove myself and my daughter from the property pending the administration of my husband's estate, that I made no immediate claim to possession, access, or control over the home, the study, or any records kept there. It was not a document that would survive a serious legal fight intact, but it was exactly the kind of paper people wave later and say, "She agreed. She left willingly. She understood." They had prepared it before the burial dirt dried. My husband's voice came back again. "Do not let them rush you into anything." My mother-in-law watched me reading. "Sign it, take what we offer, and leave with some dignity," she said. My sister-in-law leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "This is the best deal you are ever going to get." I looked up at her. Deal. That was what they thought my marriage had been. My father-in-law extended the pen. "We are trying to prevent unpleasantness," he said. "You already failed," I said. I folded the document once neatly and placed it back on the table. Then I wiped my tears. Slowly. My daughter was still clinging to me. I brushed her hair back, looked at the red handprint on her cheek, and felt something inside me stop pleading and start counting. Every word, every witness, every order they had just given in front of a room full of people. "Are you done?" I asked. For the first time all afternoon, no one answered immediately. My mother-in-law recovered first. "Pack your things and get out. There is no place for beggars here," my father-in-law added. I nodded once. "Fine." I reached into my coat pocket and took out my phone. Every eye in the room followed the movement. I dialed from memory. When the line connected, I did not step away. "I need you to come," I said. "It's time. Bring everything." I ended the call. No explanation, no tremor in my hand. When someone gets that quiet, do you trust them or do you get scared? If you like smart revenge stories where silence does the damage, subscribe and stay with me. At first they laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to reassure themselves. "Who did you call?" my sister-in-law asked. I said nothing. "Who would even come for you?" she added. My mother-in-law turned away from me like the matter was settled. "Marion," she said, "clear the child's room first. I do not want confusion later." Confusion. My daughter pressed her face into my neck. "Mom, I don't want them in my room." I kissed her hair. "I know, baby." My father-in-law glanced at the folded document on the table. "She had a chance to do this gracefully," he said. "She chose otherwise." That was when I knew greed had already outrun grief. The first 15 minutes passed in a blur of movement designed to erase us while we were still standing there. A maid carried down one of our suitcases, then another. My sister-in-law disappeared upstairs and came back holding my daughter's stuffed rabbit between two fingers as if it offended her. My daughter saw it and tensed. "Please," she whispered. "That's mine." My sister-in-law looked at her, then at me. Not for long. I took a step forward. "Put that down." My sister-in-law smiled and dropped the rabbit onto a chair. "I hate women like you," she said softly. "So sure a child can make you permanent." I stared at her long enough that her smile faded first. The laughter in the room had already started to thin, not disappear, just lose its ease. People shifted in their seats. Half-finished cups were set down. Small conversations died before the second sentence. My mother-in-law noticed it too. She tried a different tone and turned back toward the guests. "We are trying to do the right thing," she said. "The house cannot become unstable right now." Unstable. She wanted the room to hear widow and child and think risk. My sister-in-law caught that opening immediately. The company needs stability right now, she said, not grief making decisions. Then my father-in-law made his next mistake. Get me the study key, he said to Marion. There are records that need to be protected before anything disappears. I looked at him. Those are mine. No, he said. They are family property. He said it in front of everyone. He said it before anyone had told him what the will contained. And suddenly, I understood exactly what my husband had seen coming. Not just cruelty. A rush, a scramble, a hand reaching for the house, the study, the papers, and whatever else they thought they could secure before the day was over. My daughter tugged at my sleeve. Mom, are we leaving? I knelt down and took her face gently between my hands. Not yet, I said. Are they mad at me? No, baby. Then why did Grandma hit me? My throat tightened so hard I had to pause. Because she forgot how to be kind, I said. That made more sense to her than anything else she had heard all day. I held her. I wiped my tears, slowly. Then I stood again. 30 minutes had passed. My mother-in-law had stopped pretending to be compassionate. My sister-in-law had stopped smiling. My father-in-law had started checking his watch, though he would never admit it. Nobody was enjoying the scene anymore, because the longer I stayed still, the more the room stopped believing its own cruelty. If the people humiliating your child suddenly realized they needed you, would you expose them now or let them hear every word first? At around the 40-minute mark, my mother-in-law tried another push. She picked up the folded departure paper and brought it back to me with the pen. Let's not make this uglier than it already is, she said. Sign, take the child, go somewhere quiet. We will have someone bring the rest later. You already made it ugly, I said. She leaned closer. Do not test me in my own home. My daughter flinched at her tone. That tiny movement did more to me than the slap. You do not get to raise your voice at her again, I said. My mother-in-law drew back. Your husband is gone, she said. The world does not bend around you anymore. I looked past her at the front doors. We'll see, I said. 50 minutes. The house had become a waiting room no one wanted to admit they were trapped inside. One guest stood to leave. My father-in-law asked him to stay. That was how I knew he was beginning to feel it. Men like him do not ask when they still believe they command. The front door opened at almost exactly 1 hour. The room turned as one. 2 men stepped inside. One I recognized immediately. Daniel Cross, my husband's estate attorney. The other I had only met twice. Nathan Hale, senior trust officer from the private bank that handled several of the entities my husband personally controlled. Daniel carried a thick black folder. Nathan carried a slim leather case and one sealed envelope. We are here regarding Adrian's will and trust instructions, Daniel said. Hearing my husband's name out loud in that room did something no prayer at the cemetery had done. It made him present. My father-in-law straightened. We already know the estate will be handled in due course, he said. Daniel nodded. Then you should have no objection to hearing the directives in full. No one moved. Nathan set the leather case on the table beside the broken frame and the unsigned departure document. Even my sister-in-law saw the symbolism in that and went pale. Daniel opened the folder. Adrian Vale executed amended estate and trust documents 31 days before his death, he said. Under those documents, the residential property known as the Vale House, together with the controlling interests and operating accounts under his direct authority, were placed in trust for the sole benefit of his daughter. For a second the words did not land. My mother-in-law frowned. What did you say? For his daughter, Daniel repeated. Silence spread across the room. My sister-in-law's arms fell to her sides. My father-in-law took one step forward. That is not possible. There is no mistake, Daniel said. Nathan spoke next, calm and exact. Further, Mrs. Lena Vale has been named sole legal guardian and sole acting authority over all decisions connected to trust assets until the child reaches legal age. All eyes turned to me. This time, there was no contempt in them. Only calculation. And something much closer to fear. Nathan continued. No member of the extended family has authority to remove property, restrict access, redirect business operations, or demand relinquishment of keys, records, rooms, or funds without her express written authorization. He glanced deliberately at the packed suitcases, at the departure document, at the stunned faces in the room. Daniel turned another page. We were also instructed to note any attempt to coerce a departure, obtain signatures under distress, remove items from the child's residence, or interfere with the acting authority appointed under the trust. Now the room really understood. The waiting, the rushing, the orders, the paper they had tried to make me sign. It had all just become evidence. My mother-in-law shook her head. No, that is not real. I stepped forward. He knew. I said. Every face turned to me. He knew exactly who you were. No one interrupted. He knew what you would do the moment he was gone. I looked down at my daughter, then back at them. He did not leave her money. He left her protection. Then I gave them the sentence I had been carrying since the slap. You just slapped the owner. The room held that sentence like it had cut the oxygen out of it. Nathan placed one final document beside the others. For the record, he said, any continued interference after this notice exposes involved parties to immediate legal response. Daniel lifted the sealed envelope and held it out to me. Adrian left this to be delivered if there was any attempt to force you or your daughter out of the residence. My fingers shook when I took it. For the first time that day, my shaking had nothing to do with fear. I opened it carefully. The paper inside was folded twice. My husband's handwriting met me before his words did. Lena. That alone almost undid me. I read the first line silently. Then Daniel asked quietly if I wanted him to read it aloud. I looked around the room, at the guests who had watched my child be struck, at my in-laws who had prepared papers to erase us before the flowers on the coffin had wilted. I handed the letter to him. Daniel read, "If you are hearing this, then things turned cold exactly the way I feared they might. I am sorry for that. I am sorry I am not standing there to stop it myself. I know how quickly control matters more to them than kindness. They never fully understood what you were to me, and they never understood what our daughter is, so I made sure they would not get the chance to teach her that she is small. I did not leave you a fight. I left you a shield. Wait for Daniel. Wait for Nathan. Let the papers speak. And if they try to push you out, do not forgive that. Because I would not." When Daniel finished, no one spoke. My mother-in-law's face had gone white. My father-in-law stared at the floor. My sister-in-law looked as if she wanted to deny the handwriting itself. That was when the begging began. Not dramatically. Desperately. "Lena," my mother-in-law said, and her voice had changed so completely it almost sounded like another woman's. "We were grieving. We were upset. No one meant any of this the way it sounded." My sister-in-law stepped in too quickly. "This is still family. We can work this out privately." Privately, the same room where they had humiliated a child in public. My father-in-law cleared his throat. "There is no need to escalate this." Nathan answered before I could. "The escalation occurred before we arrived." My mother-in-law ignored him and focused on me with terrifying softness. "Please stay," she said. "Stay tonight. Let us talk about this together." There it was. The turn. Leave this house had become please stay. Not because love had appeared. Because fear had. Because they understood that if I walked out with my daughter, and my authority intact, they would lose access to the house, and to the structure of power they had spent years assuming would naturally pass through their hands. My sister-in-law looked at the suitcases by the stairs like she could still undo them. "I was just trying to help," she said weakly. "By stealing from a child's room," I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. My father-in-law tried one last approach, the businessman's approach, calm and rational. "Emotions were high," he said. "We all said things. No reason to let one afternoon define what happens next." One afternoon. He wanted to reduce the slap to weather. He wanted to reduce the paper to procedure. He wanted to reduce my daughter's humiliation to timing. I looked at him, and saw with complete clarity that my husband had never been protecting me from one moment. He had been protecting us from a system, from a family culture in which compassion was decoration and possession was the only language they truly spoke. My daughter tugged at my sleeve. "Mom." I bent toward her. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. The whole room heard it, and that was the real verdict. Not the will, not the trust. That question. I straightened slowly. "You were right about one thing," I said to my mother-in-law. Hope flashed across her face so quickly it almost embarrassed me for her. "She does not belong under your hand." I took my daughter's hand. Then I looked at Daniel. "Please, have their packing stopped," I said. "Ours stays." Nathan almost smiled. "Of course." My mother-in-law stared at me. "You are throwing us out." "No," I said. "I am ending your access." That landed harder than if I had screamed. My father-in-law opened his mouth, but Daniel had already begun giving instructions. "All items removed from the child's room are to be returned immediately," he said. "No locks are to be changed. No offices are to be entered. No documents are to be removed. And no one here is to speak to Mrs. Vale's daughter again without Mrs. Vale's permission." Marian nodded, once pale and silent. My sister-in-law stepped toward me. "Lena, please." I looked at the fading mark on my daughter's cheek. "No," I said. "You already used up that word." Guests began gathering coats and handbags, then leaving in a different silence than the one they had brought in. Not solemn now. Ashamed. My mother-in-law sat down hard in the nearest chair. "Please stay," she said again, but now the words sounded small. "We can fix this." I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the sound of her hand on my child's face. "You do not get to touch her again," I said. "You do not get to speak to her again today. And you do not get to call this grief and hope I mistake it for love." I turned to Marian. "Take the suitcases back upstairs," I said. "And return every item removed from my daughter's room, exactly where it came from." She nodded immediately. My father-in-law looked at the staff, then at me, then at Daniel and Nathan. For the first time since I had known him, he looked like a man discovering that authority and ownership are not the same thing. "We will need time," he said. Daniel closed the folder. "You had time," he replied. "You used it badly." The room emptied slowly after that. Flowers still stood on every surface. My husband's photograph was returned to its frame. Marian apologized in a whisper, while setting the stuffed rabbit back into my daughter's arms. My daughter clutched it against her chest and did not let go. When it was over, when the last guest had gone, and the last false note of sympathy had faded from the walls, I sat with my daughter on the long sofa facing the fireplace. No one had remembered to light. She leaned into me boneless with exhaustion. I touched her cheek gently. "You are safe," I told her. She looked up at me. "Because Dad knew." "Yes," I whispered. "Because Dad knew." They called her garbage. They tried to make me sign us out of our own lives. They packed our things, touched her room, reached for his study, and spoke about our future like we were already gone. What they never understood was that my husband had seen the whole thing before it happened. He had seen their greed under their manners, their panic under their pride, and the hand they would reach with the second his own let go. So he did not leave us at their mercy. He left us a shield. And from that night on, nobody in that house ever touched my daughter again. If you like revenge stories where the paperwork hits harder than the shouting, subscribe and stay with me for the next one.